This episode has been made possible by our awesome sponsors, Sunsail. Thanks, guys.
I said at the end, like, it felt like we'd been through a war and we had the scars of battle. You know, it just was one thing after the other. The mainsail, like, you know, was basically left with the head cart plugged in. That was all we had. The foil was off, and it's just like, what next? You know, the day before we finished, the pilot stopped working, and literally the bolt that attaches the pilot to the rudder quadrant had sheared, and I was like, you're kidding me. You know, luckily there was another one, and we just swapped pilots, but I was just like, oh, what else are you going to give us? And it was frustrating, but it was like, I saw that more as, okay, I can take the challenge, what's next? You know, throw it at me, we've got this, we're going to deal with this.
Hi guys, and welcome to the Sailing Podcast. I'm Theo Stocker, and I'm joined today by the editor of Yachting World, Helen Fretter. Thank you very much for joining us, Helen. As ever, we're going to be talking about the sea, the boats that sail on it, and the people who sail those boats. To meet our guest today, we have come to the Royal Southern Yacht Club on the River Hamble, so thanks very much to them for hosting us. But most of all, thank you very much to our guest today, who is none other than Dee Caffari, MBE. I think that's right.
Yes,
any other
correct.
titles?
No, not yet.
Now, Dee, I was looking at your CV in preparation for today, and I don't know many people who've sailed around the world more times than you have.
Well, there are some, so I've still got some laps to go.
You've still got a few laps to go.
But I'm pretty happy with the number so far.
But you're fresh back from circumnavigation number 7.
Yeah.
That's quite some miles. How many miles have you sailed?
Oh, well, I hate to think. It's probably about 28,000 each lap. So, yeah. And
My
that's
maths
not,
isn't good enough to do that quickly.
And that's not even including like all the training and the transatlantics and the fun bits in between.
Yeah. So you've done a BT Global Challenge.
Yes.
You've done a Westabout solo.
Non-stop.
On a Global Challenge boat.
Yeah.
You've done
This is a good test.
I know. I'm trying to remember.
Vendée Globe next, yes.
Vendée Globe.
Solo the East
right way,
yes.
non-stop.
A double-handed around the world.
Yes, Barcelona World Race.
Yeah.
Non-stop. And then a couple of Volvo Ocean races.
Yeah. So you did one with SCA.
Team SCA, and then Skipper Turn the Tide on Plastic.
Yeah.
And then this last one with the famous Project CIC.
And when did you get back from that one?
Literally a week ago.
Wow. Okay. So are you still sort of moving? Have you?
No, the transition to land was pretty quick, although it did feel a bit funny the first day, but I think we were so busy bouncing up and down in excitement that we didn't really notice it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us so soon. Before we get really into it, I just wanted to know a little bit about how you got into sailing and where the passion for sailing came from.
It's not the traditional path. Like most people grow up sailing in dinghies, the boats get bigger and then they go offshore. And I didn't really have that. I still went to my ballet classes and tap classes, and sailing wasn't a thing. My father had a motorboat, and that was like our weekend caravan. So holidays and seamanship and miles, you know, I did a lot from everything from the Northern Islemer down to La Rochelle and all the ports in between. And so I probably learnt my seamanship skills from him in that respect. But sailing didn't come until I went to university. And I think my dad used to talk about stories of, wouldn't it be lovely to retire and have a nice yacht and go sailing? And my mum continued working and sending brown paper envelopes full of money to keep him in the lifestyle he'd become accustomed to, which never happened.
So we all have dreams of that.
Yeah. And I went to university, and I went to Leeds and did a sports science degree, and I majored in outdoor activities, and one of the things we had to do was go sailing. And as I was learning the sailing, I remember breaking the ice at Yeadon Tarn to do my capsize drills in our Wayfarers and our Enterprises. And then we went sailing off the west coast of Scotland, which was absolutely beautiful, all around the different islands. And I think I fell in love with it there, and kind of came up with the motto that even if the other boat doesn't know it, if they're going in the same direction, it's clearly a race.
Yeah. And that sort of ignited your passion then, and presumably you've done all this sports stuff, you quite enjoy a bit of competition.
Yeah, naturally competitive, annoyingly so, to the detriment sometimes. But I did night school, I did my yacht master, and I then had it was kind of on the back burner, and I started teaching and had a sensible career, as my mother would call it. And it was actually a holiday. I did a diving and sailing charter where you dive off the boat and you sail around off East Africa, off Pemba Island and Zanzibar and Tanzania. And it was meeting those people, and they talked to me about how they got into their careers, that I then investigated UKSA on the Isle of Wight and went for a complete career change. But I reassured my mother that should it not work, I could always go back into teaching. I haven't had to do that.
No, and I think we'll come on to it a little bit later, but you've done a lot of sort of coaching and mentoring along the way of bringing young people along with you and giving them opportunities and platforms to learn. So
I think it's really important. The best way to learn is by sailing with people with more experience. And it's really hard to get those opportunities or get access to those people. But a lot of the projects I've done have actually had legacy as a key thing. You know, Turn the Tide on Plastic was all about a young crew. 80% of my crew were under 30 sailing around the world for the first time. All very gifted sailors, but just hadn't had the experience of around the world. And I had a fully mixed crew as well. So suddenly it was a platform for more girls to get that opportunity as well. And that was really important for Alexia Barrier and myself with this last project, with the famous project CIC, that we had some kind of legacy. We were all learning to sail a multi-hull for the first time, so it didn't matter how many sea miles we had, it was all new. But my experience could help, Alexia's experience could help, and some of the girls got the opportunity of a lifetime sailing. I mean, I think they've been ruined. They've now just sailed around the world non-stop on their first lap in 57 days.
I know, where do you go from there if that's the start of your career?
Exactly. I was like, good luck finding the next ride.
Yeah. A week of Cow's Week or something doesn't look quite as adventurous anymore.
Not quite as appealing, but maybe the socialisation and the chance to have a shower every day might be appealing.
Yes, yeah. I did have a debate on one of these podcasts about whether racing or cruising was better. And the idea of going home at the end of a day and having a shower was definitely an appeal of inshore racing. Now, you mentioned the famous project, your Jules Verne Trophy campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about, what is the Jules Verne Trophy and how did your campaign come about? What did you set out to achieve?
So the Jules Verne is a very unique race. It's against the clock. It's got very simple rules. It was the brainchild of 3 sailors, Florence Artaud, Mickey and Yves Cornick. And they were like, wouldn't it be amazing if a boat could go around the world in 80 days? So it was conceived with, there's the start line, which is between the Lizard Lighthouse and the Ushant Lighthouse at the end of the English Channel. Go around the world in any boat with any team that you think could do the job and come back and cross the same line, passing the 3 Great Capes to port. That's important. I need to remember that. I have a reputation. And you know, back then, the first boat that went round did it in 79 days something. And it's just like, wow, so it is possible in 80 days. And it's been one of those records that's kind of been there that people attempt over time. To date, there's been 32 attempts, 16 successful roundings, but only 10 new records. So it's pretty tough to do. And last week, literally within 24 hours, we had 2 records.
Yeah, that's incredible. So for sailing around the world, it's quite a simple course, but there's a whole lot of stuff. When you're out on the water, there's a whole lot of stuff that has to line up in terms of weather and that kind of thing. So can you describe the course to us and the sort of the currents and the weather systems that you're navigating and needing to get all lined up to get around quickly? Yeah,
so the start line at Ushant, you want to be propelled down the Atlantic in good time. And now with today's forecast, you can be pretty confident for a 10-day forecast. So what you're looking at is to line up the North Atlantic crossing of the doldrums into a system in the South Atlantic. And then you've got to hope that one of those little depressions will come off Brazil and allow you to cut the corner into the Southern Ocean. After that, it's a bit of a luck of the gods, of the weather, of will it carry on. You sail around the Southern Ocean. The further south you go, the shorter the route, but the higher the risk of ice. And we know with climate change that's moving further and further north all the time. So you need that satellite detection ahead of time so you can avoid the worst. You come out of Cape Horn, you exit the Southern Ocean, you point at home, but it's still a long way to go, 7,500 miles, and the South Atlantic can be vicious. But of course, we're getting faster and faster going around the world that we go to be in the Southern Hemisphere summer. So you get the best of the weather in the Southern Ocean. But it means we arrive back midwinter with the winter storms coming into the Bay of Biscay. And that was proved literally last week with Storm Ingrid being between us and the finish line, gave us our worst sea state throughout the whole course, just in those last 1,000
Worse than
miles.
the Southern Ocean.
Southern Ocean was easy. We had similar winds, 40 to 50 knots, but the waves are much bigger, they're much smoother, and it seems easier. I don't know whether it's because you're in those conditions for a lot longer, but the sea state is everything on a multi-hull. And when you have 8 to 10 metre waves on a continental shelf coming into the Bay of Biscay, like everything just seems to be really kind of intense. And it was the worst sea state I've ever encountered.
And
Really?
you mentioned, obviously, 2 records broken within 24 hours, effectively. Explain a little bit about yours and why in 2026 yours was different.
Yeah, so Thomas Coville came in and after 9 years of the record being held, actually managed to break it by 12 hours. So it was like phenomenal achievement. And he's had 3 attempts to try and do this with his boat. He spent 3 years working it up, and his boat is 3 years old. On the other side, of the flip side of the coin, 24 hours later, we came in. We were sailing a 20-year-old boat. It was the boat that held the current record from 2017, Francis Joyon's E-Deck Sport. It was quite a basic boat, but we then actually became the first all-female team to complete a non-stop circumnavigation on a multi-hull. Now, Tracy Edwards, 25 years ago, set out on Royal Sun Alliance, and they dismasted just before Cape Horn, so in the Southern Ocean. And that was the furthest a female team had got. And so by completing it, we've kind of just put the benchmark there. And actually our time ends up being the 6th fastest time, elapsed time around the world.
I mean, it is astonishing when you think about it that, say, it's 2026. Only one female team has ever attempted it before you guys. Only one's ever completed it. And only a tiny number of women have ever sailed a big multi around the world, full stop.
Yeah, at Cape Horn, I think we increased the number from 3 women to round Cape Horn to 11 women to round Cape Horn on a multi-hull, which is crazy. And I think it's more about just, there's no shortage of willing volunteers. I think it's just opportunity. And I think hopefully what the famous project will have done with Alexia's, concept is just change the perception and make people realise it is possible and it is doable and the girls can do it.
And that was the goal from the outset, wasn't it? Was to set a female benchmark. So how hard was it to get this project off the ground?
Well, it's been 3 years since the concept when Alexia first what do you think of this? And she rang me and she's like, I'm thinking of this. What do you think? I was like, yeah, I'm in. Thinking in my head, yeah, it happens. And literally 6 months later, we had a Mod 70 and a Maxi Trimaran. And you're like, oh, okay, this is going to happen. And we had lots of stops and starts along the way. There were sponsors, we had some momentum, and then it all ground to a halt. But, ferociously tenacious is Alexia Barrier, and she did not give up. And I said to her, I support you the whole way, and I'm there as and when. And even just a year ago, she was like, I can't guarantee this is going to happen. I can't stop you taking other work. And it wasn't until April last year that we were like, okay, this is a go. And so we had 6 months to prepare. And then off we went. And to complete it on the first time with the amount of training and preparation we had is pretty impressive.
Which was quite limited, wasn't it, in terms of time?
Very limited. And because it all cost money, and we didn't have that much money, we didn't have that much time. Time and finances are the best commodities you've got, and you're always short of both. We probably had 10 days sailing max on the boat together as a crew. We got the last crew member in September. And we set off November. So, when you think of packing spares and packing food and getting organised, it wasn't a surprise that it took us the whole Atlantic to kind of feel confident and learn how to sail the boat, really.
So when you go out preparing for a race like this and learning to sail an enormous trimaran like that, what does the training look like? What do you go, right, here we are, life jackets on. I don't know, maybe you probably I don't know, wear life jackets, but you got your sailing kit on, tie the lines off. How do you sort of go out, let's go, and because you can't practice a round the world race, it's sort of, you're either doing it or you're not. So what was the training like? How do you prepare to sail a boat like that?
It's really interesting because the biggest thing to get used to is the speed. And we'd had really good, because we'd spent 2 years with a Mod 70, and a Mod 70 trimaran is very much on the edge. It's quite complex, there's a lot of hydraulics, there's a canting rig, and there's a lot of things to think about, and it happens very quickly. So you get comfortable at 30 knots and you practice sailing the boat on the edge, and you sail with people that have got experience. We sailed with Brian Thompson a lot, We sailed with other people that had sailed the boat a lot. And then we moved on to the big boat, and it was just like, okay, this is really different. And everything was big. Everything took 2 of us to do. Even to lift the fenders up took 2 of us. It was like that big.
So what's the size of the boat?
So it's a 100-foot tri-round. So it's 32 meters by 23. It's a big square, and it felt quite agricultural compared to the Mod 70. The Mod 70 felt like a bit nippy, and everything all happened at once. This was like, okay, everything's big and heavy, and you just got to set it up and then go. It's for sailing in straight lines. And so when you're training, doing manoeuvres, yes, you get confident with the boat, but that actually isn't what a Jules Verne Trophy is about. Jules Verne Trophy is about inline speed and staying consistent at that high speed. And our biggest asset then was Clément Surtel, who was actually a crew member on Joyon's crew for the Jules Verne Trophy. He became our technical manager and literally helped us fast track how to sail this boat and how to make everything work, how to rig it, and how to make it, get around the world. So, fair play to him. I think there was an element of his thinking, what are these girls doing? And I think when we came back, he was pretty proud.
Yeah. Oh, and it's a huge thing to have done. So talk us through the race itself then. So you'd got the boat, you'd got the crew, you'd done a bit of training, you'd figured out how to tack and jibe the thing, presumably. I'm really interested to know how you do tack and jibe the thing, particularly sort of in the southern, no, you're not probably tacking in the Southern Ocean at all, but going around the course. Talk us through the sort of the start and getting ready to go for it, and because you're not racing against anybody else at the time, you can start whenever you want to. How do you make that decision of when to go? Yeah,
so we had a weather team. We worked with Christian Dumas and his team, and it's about looking for, we're not looking for perfection. The chances of us getting the record on the first attempt were going to be so slim. So are we looking for perfection? No, we're looking for something good that we can manage. But of course, to get a good departure to go south with a downwind trajectory means you've got to go upwind from Brest to get there. So actually, when the decision was made to go, we had to go upwind in 35 knots for 30 miles to get to the start line. And that was probably the worst sea state we saw. We were like, really? Is this a good idea? But then you turn around and go downwind and you're like, oh, yes, much better. But that decision to go, it was like, how long are we going to wait? Because if this first window isn't quite right, should we wait for another one? Will it come? And we'd had a couple of dates that had shown themselves but had disappeared again. And so we were like, okay. He's like, no, this one we could go. And I think it cost money to be on standby. And
because you've got the whole team there waiting, not doing anything else. They're just...
Alexa's like, at some point we're going because, there's a finite resource here, so we're going to go. And we're like, okay. And then we spoke to Christian. He was like, oh, it's at 50%. And that was on the Monday. On the Tuesday, he's like, no, it's still okay, but not 100%. And then Wednesday, it was like, okay, this is 80%. No, it was 60%. And Thursday morning, it was 80%. We were like, right, we're going. So literally Thursday, we tell the team. You can see the shore team's eyes like, oh, I had so many more jobs on my list. And then Thursday night, we packed the spares. Friday, we packed the food and loaded it on the boat. And Saturday, we left. And I think it was so quick, no one had a chance to really think about what they were about to do. And we set off and we worried about it then.
And how long did it take you to feel like, oh, actually we're doing this? Like, we're really in it?
I think we got to the South Atlantic before people were like, okay, no, this is the bit Brian told us about. We'd kind of done
Brian Thompson.
We'd done a trip around the world with him virtually, and he's like, this bit is this bit's that. And he always talked about the South Atlantic being flat water, straight line speed, and that's the bit where you relax before you enter the Southern Ocean. So when we got to that bit, we were like, oh yeah, no, we're here now. And it's just as he said. And, everyone had found their feet. We'd got more comfortable with the pilot settings and the boat speed. Our mileage was going up each day. And it was like, okay, here we go. Whereas initially it was a bit of we were doing a lot of driving, and we had a full moon when we started, so it wasn't so bad at night. But we were like, what are we going to do when there's no moon? At some point we've got to be happy with the pilot, and we were trying different settings and getting that, because we just hadn't had time to train on that, really.
And what was the North Atlantic like for you from the start line and getting across the equator? Because I don't think that was entirely straightforward, was it?
No, it was really complex, actually. We started well, and then if we missed the window, then it was more complex. And we missed the window because we weren't quite up to pace. So we went on a horrible sea state. So we were tired because we'd had quite a full week prepping the boat. And Alexa's like, we just need to manage this. And we don't know how seasick people are going to be because it's a very different motion on a trimaran. And like, let's just get into it gently. And I think that was a good call because it's easy to kind of everything to lose and nothing to gain. And I think that was a good call because it kept us through till the end. But as a result, we missed the window at Portugal, so ended up driving down the coast. Then we had to go through the Cape Verdes, and then the doldrums weren't quite that good. And actually, the Cape Verdes were the last piece of land we saw until we saw Cape Horn.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it? There's a long way to go.
Yeah, literally, it was Cape Verdes, then Cape Horn, and then we saw the Azores before we got to Ushant. And that was all we saw the whole way around.
What does that feel like? Does it just feel sort of quite abstract because effectively you're surrounded by a disc of grey wobbly stuff and it just stays the same the whole way? Or do you really have a sense of the distance that you're covering, or is it just sort of time and miles ticking past?
It's like Groundhog Day. It's for the girls, they changed every 3 hours. Alexa and I changed every 4 hours, and it was like, just 4 hours later with the same stuff. And it was funny because it was Deb's, our youngest sailor, Deborah Blair, 23 years old. I mean, what an opportunity. She's never been to the Southern Hemisphere before. And she was like, I still don't feel like I've been in the Southern Hemisphere because all I did was sail around an ocean.
Yeah, you want to go and see some sights and sit on a beach.
I've never been on land in the Southern Hemisphere. I didn't really see anything in the Southern Hemisphere. So it was really funny. She saw Cape Horn and she was like, oh, wow. And that was it.
But presumably, I mean, clocking 600 plus miles a day, that must take some recalibration.
Yeah, and you start to manage your days differently. For me, I'm massively driven by milestones and sense of achievement. That's how I work. And I think it's quite nice to share that, especially because they were like just lost in this offshore void. Well, how do we know where we are? What are we looking at? So it was like the Cape of Good Hope. It was then the Kerguelen Islands. Okay, then it was Bex's birthday was a landmark. Then it was Cape Lewin. Then it was Christmas. Then it was New Zealand. Then it was Point Nemo. And then it was Cape Horn. And suddenly there was, every few days, there was something to celebrate. And it'd be, I don't know, some Haribo or a bar of chocolate or, something that would make a landmark moment. And it was like, this is quite good. It's something all the time. And
that sort of obviously keeps everyone going and gives them something to aim for. Were there any sort of low points where you really had to sort of G everyone up and get everyone motivated again? What were the things that sort of...
Yeah, there were a few times where we had to realign our objectives and, the record wasn't an option. In the South Atlantic going south, we were only a day behind and it was still, we're playing this game. This is quite exciting. We'd just got our low pressure to cut the corner and we were heading into the south. So I'm prepping everybody. Okay, Southern Ocean's a couple of days away. It's going to get cold. We need to do all the checks, all the preparation. And then we had our mainsail lock first issue. And we slowed down.
So the mainsail lock is the little bit on the halyard that takes the weight of the mainsail so that it's not on a stretchy halyard. So
the halyard sheath wouldn't hold the main.
Yeah.
It's literally to go and put the car onto a lock. So the main car is on the halyard and just underneath is the locking mechanism. It's got like two little flippers that flip in and you pull it up, you trip it and it comes down.
Yeah, and then you can put loads of tension on without it all being
sat on the lock
halyard.
and the halyard's like kind of not redundant, basically. Yeah. And that didn't come off the lock. And then it didn't go on the lock. So we were like, okay, let's drop the main and have a look because we're prepping everything to go into the Southern Ocean. And we spent, I'd say 3 days we lost time because we were not really sailing and we were making this decision of the mainsail lock. We didn't identify exactly what the problem was or how to fix it. And we didn't really know if it would go in or off each time.
So presumably to find out, you're sending somebody up a very tall rig quite a lot as
yes,
well.
So
yes.
The interesting thing is you can go up inside our rig. So initially you go up inside because it's much safer because they just rattle. But it's a very controlled environment. So it's not the nicest place, but up Molly went. But you can't see that much from the inside. So
how did you decide who went up? Was it drawing straws?
It was either Molly or Bex all the time. Two nippers. There you go, your job. And they were checking the lock system and the trip system to make sure that was functioning.
Just talk me through how you go up inside the mast. I'm almost imagining like going up a cathedral tower with a little spiral staircase.
The mast is massive. Like you can't put your arms around the mast. It's huge. The cord of it is huge, and they easily fit inside. They just have to go one side or the other of the tie bars, and up they go. When they get to the very top, they have to have their...
You hoist them up on a...
Yeah, when they get to the very top, they have to have their arms above their heads.
Yeah, and then can they see out of the mast to see the lock?
No, you're on comm system.
Okay, so you can see the locking mechanism from the inside.
You can see it. You can see the trip lines, and you can see a certain level, and then you have to go outside and see it. So the inside is the first option, because you just want something really obvious, like the trip line's not working or the bungee's broken or something. And when that's not the case, you go outside. And we were like, okay, let's drop it, bring it down, let's take it off, let's have a look. And the little flippers were stuck. And there's a little piece of titanium that goes across with a plate on the top, and it was kind of moving. And the tolerance is really fine. So I don't know whether it had been steel before and it had been changed to titanium and it was too soft. And we were like, do we continue, do we not? And for Alexia, she's the skipper, it's her responsibility, I'm there to support her. We were like, these are the options. We stop in Cape Town. We turn around, go back, fix it, go again. Or we keep going. But now we've just been going slow for a few days. Like, what are we going for? Like, the record's gone. So I don't want to limp round with 2 reefs in the main. That's not what we set out to do. What are we doing? And eventually we got to the point where we were going, and we were going to sail properly and just deal with the lock when it happened.
Yeah. I mean, the danger, I guess, with the lock is the worst case scenario would be that it gets stuck with the full main and you can't reduce sail.
So the issue, like, will it come off the lock? And then will it go on the lock? And so you never knew. It was like Jeopardy. It was like, let's roll the dice and see what happens this time. So when we reassessed and realigned and like, right, we're going, this is how we're going to sail. It's like we're going to sail as normal as possible, and everybody's up for a reef, because maybe it will happen, maybe it won't, and maybe it will take us a long time, or maybe it will be quick. And everyone's like, oh, okay. And that's a big call when you're entering the Southern Ocean for the first time. To go in knowing the boat's not 100% is a really big call.
And for you as as a leader, as somebody who's gone around with crews of all different experience levels in the past, how do you communicate that and reassure them that this is the right decision to be making?
I think they knew we hadn't taken it lightly. It had taken a few days to get there, and it had been quite an emotional time, everybody processing what was going on at their own speed. And it took a bit of outside influence to be like, this is a bigger picture. Yeah, the record's gone, but actually what you will achieve is massive. And at the end of the day, how do you get Southern Ocean experience, or a multi-hull in the Southern Ocean experience, without putting a multi-hull in the Southern Ocean? And it was just like, it's almost too good not to do. But even now when I talk about it, it's like, that was a massive call. I mean, the 4 that didn't know any different were just like, oh, okay, you're telling us that's what we're going to do, we're going to do it. And I was like, oh, shoulders of responsibility. And, it did cause us a bit of a headache, but it gave us something to work on each time we wanted to put a reef in or out.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by how you sail these boats. Can you talk us through how you put a reef in at sea?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter what boat you're in, whether it's a multi-hull or not, putting a reef in downwind is always the hardest.
Yeah, I mean, on a cruising boat,
it sticks against the main, it sticks against the lazy jacks, it sticks against the shrouds. It doesn't matter how much you depower, it's just fixed, and then you've got to pull it down.
But you don't really want to turn into the wind because you double the apparent wind speed.
Yes, and you end up going backwards.
Yeah.
Possibly for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's that battle. So what you're trying to do is stay as fast as possible as you ease the main, so that you can unload it and it still does flap. So you're using the apparent wind as much as you can. So you're down traveller, you've eased the sheet, you've pulled up on the lazy jacks to depower, and then you've got a downline as well, because it doesn't matter how physical you are, you're not going to pull it down. So you ease, get it off the lock, hopefully, eventually, and you ease and you pull in on the downline and you try and pull the outboard reef line. And then it's the tidy up that actually takes the process. Like that, all being well, it goes in and you bring the main back on and you start sailing, but then you've got to put people in the boom, because you've got to sort out all the folds of sail so that you're not just filling them with water over time, because then the boom gets really heavy, the sail gets heavy, and you've got a whole nother load of issues. And even then, we tied it up, and some people still had to go in the boom to empty the water out sometimes.
And in terms of the loads and the weight, just like a line, it weighs so much on this boat, right? Everything
is heavy, everything is massive, and everything feels really big and bulky, but you need it for the loads. but it's amazing how quickly you adapt and get used to it. For us, and for some manoeuvres, it was really important to have all 4 places on the pedestal filled so that we had maximum power that we could. But it's just getting the right people in the right place. So you knew who to wake up for different manoeuvres to make sure stuff was done.
What's the hardest manoeuvre to do, like physically or in terms of time that it would take?
Well, in our situation, it was always the reef because we didn't know. But the J0 is a big old sail. So if you're furling that and dropping it and changing to the J1, that's a big process. It just takes time.
And a lot of elbow grease.
Yeah, and grunt. Yeah, just time and tenacity because you just got to get it done.
So you made the decision to go for it into the South Atlantic. How was the Atlantic? How did you get on with the main? And once you'd gone around Cape of Good Hope, what was it like? Obviously, it's the first time for lots of the crew in the Southern Ocean. How did they find it? And how did you and the boat find it?
Yeah, I think the Southern Indian Ocean wasn't too bad. We were quite far north, so it didn't feel cold. And I think everyone was expecting to be frozen straight away. And I was like, no, that's coming. We're saving that for the Pacific. Trust me, you'll be cold. And they were like, oh, okay. And, there's a lot of islands. So, there was interest along the way. As you go past the Kwazay Islands, the Kerguelen Islands, there's lots of reference along there. And the weather wasn't that bad. It was, quite a nice introduction to the South. And initially it wasn't too bad. And I don't know whether because you have to make that decision. Do you go for the reef early in case it doesn't happen? Or do you push it as hard as you can and then hope you don't have to do it? Like, the big wind's gone now, just bear away and go faster. And, that was good. Good job we didn't waste time putting the reef in. So that was always a dilemma. And sometimes we were quite confident because it wasn't going to last for long. But other times it was like, no, the wind's building and staying, so we're going to have to put this reef in at some point. And initially we needed a wave, something to kind of shake the rig to help the flippers in the lock come out. And because it was taking time, like Alexia would come up more onto a reach so that we could try and bounce off some waves, and that worked for a while. So that was a new way of doing it. But of course, you're there going downwind, and then suddenly she has to come up, and it's like, and everyone's trying to talk. It's like, whoa, I can't see anything. And then that didn't work so well in the Pacific, and we were like, right, what are we going to do? And so we tried a new manoeuvre. Bex came up with it, so it's called the Hornell, and we had to jibe to put it on the lock. And it's the same process, where you jibe with the main in, and the action on the mast shook it enough to knock it out. So we would jibe to put it in, which isn't so bad when you're going downwind. And with a multi-hull, when you tack or jibe, as soon as you get downwind, the boat slows down. It's not like a monohull where you go into it at pace, and the more pace you have, the less load there is on everything. It just slows down. So it's actually, you sheet everything in and then you ease it out so you come out the other side smoothly. And tacking as well, you basically stop, and if you don't get a good tack, you have to reverse out. It's like a 3-point turn.
Yeah, so like you get stuck in irons.
You don't tack if you can help it, because it's just painful. So we had this system of we're either going to shake it off a wave, or we're going to jibe and make it happen. And invariably that did happen, but a few times in the Atlantic as we were coming back up north, it wasn't working so well, and we would just kind of ignore it and go and do something else, and then it would randomly take itself off the lock, or it'd be like, it's off. Hey guys, it's off the lock. Or we would threaten to put Molly up the rig, and she'd get ready, and we'd put her on the halyard, and then someone would check and it'd be like, oh, it's off the lock. And it was that kind of unknown, like, is it or isn't it? We had no idea, and that was the hardest thing to manage. And of course that makes you super inefficient.
Yeah. Did it make it really hard to plan your weather strategy as well? Because you literally didn't know what sails you might be able to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few times we were like, oh no, life was really good, because Christian would be like, oh, you're going really fast, this is really good. And we were like, yeah. And then we had a problem putting the lock in, putting the reef in. So, we lost a bit of time. Or he'd be like, is everything okay? Because we'd stop for a bit, or we'd point the wrong way. And it's like, yeah, just trying to put the reef in. And then it was hard of do we go through the process again and shake it up, shake it out and put it up again? It's like, because then we'll have to put a reef in again. And it was that dreaded thing of at some point we're going to have to do it. So, and it was hard for us, but also hard for the weather team, because if you stay on this pace, and then you'd lose a bit of time. So it was frustrating.
And you lost a board as well, didn't you? Or lost the use of a board?
Yeah, our starboard foil was down, and we literally were doing 30 knots in the Pacific, and went 30 knots to 5 knots. Literally, it was a big, everybody shuffled forwards, like, what was that? Flew up on deck, and this massive net, ghost net, and buoys and everything was wrapped around the foil. So we backed off of that, like, went upwind, tacked, backed off, and floated free, and it was stuck down and it wouldn't come up, but actually over time it realigned itself and came up. And the board was in one piece. It was slightly damaged, but it was still in one piece. So we were like, oh God, not so bad. Like, don't look too closely and I'm sure it'll be fine. We came around Cape Horn and had 3 glamour days on a port jibe, so with the starboard foil down, and literally we were doing 30 knots and it was great. And when we came to jibe, we couldn't lift the board up. And what we hadn't realised during our 30 knots was we'd hit something, because the foil had been pushed back underneath the boat, so forwards on top, and it had gone into the lifting post. So there was damage, so we couldn't lift it. But what we didn't realise, because of the damage before, it had obviously weakened the structure at some point. It had just taken the end of the foil off.
Oh, it's just gone.
So that's why we hadn't realised we'd hit something. So we'd obviously clipped it and it had just sacrificed its end of the foil. So when we did eventually get it realigned on the other jibe, we lifted it up, I was like, oh, not a lot of that left then. It was like a massive shark bite out of it. And I was like, oh. So we secured it up, because we didn't have a lifting post. We secured it up, and the girls did a great job, like putting some thread bar through to stop it dropping down. We lifted it as high as we could, because when we went back on that jibe, it was like a 10 to 15% performance drop, just because of the hydrodynamics. It was horrendous and real bad vibration. So we were quite pleased that most of the Atlantic was on starboard, so that foil was in the air. But of course, then when we got to the North Atlantic, it was all on the other side, and we were like, oh God, but actually it was in 40 to 50 knots and 8-metre waves, so we were over worrying about the foil by then.
That was a non-problem.
Yeah, I was like, fine.
And how hard is it to keep everyone motivated when, say, you've got a boat that is maybe not more compromised than you would have expected, but, you know, because some damage is inevitable, but there's quite a lot to deal with, you know, having massively different performances, different jibes and the main problems, and just kind of keeping everyone up in a performance kind of headset?
Yeah, that was probably the hardest, because I said at the end, like, it felt like we'd been through a war and we had the scars of battle. You know, it just was one thing after the other. The mainsail, like, you know, was basically left with the head cart plugged in. That was all we had. The foil was off, and it's just like, what next? You know, the day before we finished, the pilot stopped working, and literally the bolt that attaches the pilot to the rudder quadrant had sheared, and I was like, you're kidding me. You know, luckily there was another one. And we just swapped pilots, but I was just like, oh, what else are you going to give us? And it was frustrating, but it was like, I saw that more as, okay, I can take the challenge. What's next? You know, throw it at me. We've got this. We're going to deal with this. And I think we got to the point where we were close enough where everyone was just like, no, we are getting to the finish no matter what. And that was always the dialogue I tried to have with people, because I could see some frustration. You know, if you've got an Olympic gold medal, like tomorrow, and you've got 20 years of Olympic campaigning, you only deal at 100%, and you are looking at 99 to 101. And if you're not in that realm, like, what's the point? And so to get her on board, it was like, no, we are going to do this, and the weather is going to do this, and we are going to do this. And, you know, it was good to see her change her mindset and buy into what we were having to deal with.
But even having got so close, then there was still a massive challenge as Storm Ingrid, which, you know, caused both you and the Sodebo team some issues. Like, how on the edge was that, going through that big depression at the end?
So it was like, and I think because we were online, like, everyone can communicate now, and we had an international crew where people were flying from the other side of the world to be there for the finish, and that finish time kept changing by days. Yeah, 22nd, no, 23rd, or actually maybe the 26th. And like, to coordinate that was getting more and more frustrating for everybody. And then we have to have a conversation with them. Alexia and I had a conversation. We knew it was an option of, we might have to wait for the worst of the storm and then go. It's like, how do you tell people we're going to kill time at the Azores and not proceed to home when they're talking to their loved ones about, a hot shower, the first meal they want to eat, seeing them on the dock, and they're going to arrive on the Saturday and we're telling them they're not going to arrive till the Tuesday or something. You're like, oh. So it was really hard to do. But you just have to be open and honest. It's like, okay, forecast is 8 to 10 metre swells on a continental shelf into the Bay of Biscay. And it's like, this is not like all the way around. They were like, well, so what have we been in around the world? And we were like, we pretty much looked at around 6.5 metres as being our limit. But they're in the south and they're big rollers and it's quite nice.
So they're much smoother, slower, well, not slower, but they're much more gentle. They're not sort of
and it feels,
walling up and getting steep
exactly.
and braking.
And we were like, we're kill time, and it's like even in 30 knots around the Azores, it's quite hard to stay in the lee of an island. You still have to keep sailing because it's much easier to keep moving. But obviously you've got acceleration zones, you've got your own issues, and then we had the mainsail issue that kind of took it out of the equation, and we were like, well, actually now that's a decision made. We need to start because we're on limited sails and we still need to get home. But 8 to 10 metre swells on the continental shelf, when the girls saw it with breaking waves, walls of water that were breaking waves down onto us, they were like, I get this. This is really not nice. I was like, yeah.
So you're pushing on for the last, what was it, sort of 48, 72 hours?
Yeah, so the 23rd was like Storm Ingrid time. That was 40 to 50 knots, 8 to 10 metre waves. That was pretty miserable, but we were on bare poles. So our mast alone is 30 square metres, and we rotated that between 20 degrees and 10 degrees. That was our trim with our head car plugged in. And then the 24th, things got a bit better. So we had the J3 out, and then we went to the J2. We were flying towards the finish. And then the 25th had 6 hours of a difficult sea state. And that was 8 to 10 metres again, and that was the worst. That was the worst sea state, and we really, really found that one hard. And I think for me, that was like less than 24 hours from the finish, and I was like, this is questionable. And it's just like, we just need to finish.
As in questionable, should you be there? Or
just how we were saying, like, it was fine if you bore away, but we were so keen to point at the finish and close the miles that just pointing the wrong way just didn't seem right. But we couldn't come up, and we tried to come up, and that's when we were like, this sea state is horrendous. We came back down, waited for the wind, and came up. But we probably pushed our luck trying too hard then. And then, back to J2 and to the finish line, and that never felt so good.
Just tell me that you had problems with the mainsail at the end that weren't related to the halyard hook.
Well, so it's interesting. The halyard hook caused an issue where we were probably flogging the main for longer than you need to, putting a reef in and out, because it was taking us time. And then we're trying to do multiple jibes to get it off the lock on a main that's flapping. I mean, nothing we did helped the main. And I think we probably killed a few years off that main every time we did that manoeuvre. So we didn't help. And when we had it on the two reefs and we went to jibe to get it off the lock and it ripped, we were like, well, I'm not surprised that happened, really. Saw that coming. And it was like, we just need to deal with it. The hardest one was when it was at the top of the mast, not coming out the lock, and it ripped below the second reef, and the bottom bit was like hanging in the lazy jacks. We were like, okay, let's recover the bottom bit. Now, how do we get the top bit off the lock?
And when you say rip, like, we're talking meters, aren't we?
Well,
like,
the rip on the second reef literally was leech to luff. And we were like, okay, so we still got the top of the mainsail at the top of the rig that we still need to get down. So, it was like not easy at all. Yeah, I mean, it was an impressive rip. Arts and crafts were not going to fix that one.
And you've done some mainsail repairs before.
I've done some big mainsail. And even
fixed.
Stacey, who did our mainsail repair before, she was like, well, I could, but I was like, yeah, but it's just going to rip somewhere else, right? She's like, yep. I was like, yeah, we're not wasting energy on that.
Hi guys, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say a few words about our sponsors, Sunsail, who have made this episode possible. If you've been on a sailing charter holiday, you'll know that there is a moment when you realise the day is completely yours. The anchor's down, the water's warm, and nothing is demanding your attention. That's the kind of summer Sunsail is built for. With Sunsail Bareboat in Greece and Croatia, you sail on your own terms. You move with the conditions, linger when a place feels right, and shape the week around the water, the wind, and the people you're sailing with. No compromises, just time spent properly at sea. you're doing it aboard Sunsail's award-winning yachts, boats designed for real cruising with the space and comfort that make long days under sail feel easy and the evenings anchor something you genuinely look forward to. Greece is ideal for this kind of sailing. Short passages, steady breezes and islands close enough that the journey is always part of the pleasure. Croatia offers the same freedom, clear water, sheltered routes and harbours that invite you to slow everything down. And if you like the idea of bareboat sailing but you want a bit more support, Sunsail flotillas give you that balance. You sail your own yacht with a lead crew and local knowledge on hand, plus a group to share the experience with. So if a Mediterranean summer is calling, do it under sail. Visit www.sunsail.com/UK and the link's in the description below, and start planning a summer that feels just right from the moment you cast off. Okay, let's get back to the episode. I'm aware that we're about to cross the finish line in the story. I'm really keen to know a little bit about what life was like on board. What watch systems did you have? How many people did you have on deck at a time? Were you driving, relying on the autopilot? What was sort of day-to-day life like? I mean, obviously we've talked to this a little bit, sort of Groundhog Day, but in terms of boat handling and watch keeping and navigating, that kind of stuff.
So the 6 girls, so if you take Alexia and I out of the equation, the 6 girls had an opposite, and they did 3 hours on, 3 hours off. So there were 3 bunks, and they in their pairs, they swapped over. So we had our 2 trimmers opposite each other. We had Bex and Stacey opposite each other, and we had Molly and Debs opposite each other. So, both bow team were opposite. So there's always a trimmer, a bow person, and someone else. So there was, like, the kind of skill-wise we were covered. They did, their first hour was like a standby watch. So they were dressed, but they were in the cuddy, they were eating their food, they were maybe messaging, but they were around if they were needed. And then for 2 hours, they had to work really hard to make the boat go fast. So we always had 2 people on deck, but there were 4 people available. One person was either driving and the other person with the traveller in their hand, or the up-down for the power on the jib. Or they babysat the pilot and trimmed for the pilot and the conditions. And then Alexia and I did 4 hours on, 4 hours off. That way we sailed with everybody. They didn't get bored of us that way. And 8 in the morning, midday, 8 in the evening, midnight were the weather updates. And we'd get them through from the weather team with a bit of a description. We'd load them on, we'd have a look at them, we'd look at all the options. I'd kind of, if I got them when I was on deck, then I would talk to Alexia what I'd seen, what they'd said, and then she'd look at it. And then by the time I got up, she was like, I've had this idea because I've looked at this. What do you think? And we'd look, and then we'd have a conversation with them. We'd like, can we do this? A few times they'd be like, you'll be at Cape Horn on the 10th. We were like, no. We're being there on the 6th. Find some different weather. But, we always kind of questioned and challenged, and we'd hand over to each other. And then in between that, we had all the other kind of responsibilities, as in sending the content off and writing the information needed. But it was really important to get a continuity of information so that everybody's trying to achieve the same thing. So every hour someone fresh would come up, but there's still 2 people that knew the information. So it wasn't like Chinese whispers or a complete change, which doesn't help consistency on performance. Yes,
so you're eating freeze-dried food?
We ate freeze-dried food, and then what we did is our food was in weeks. So we had week 1, week 2, week 3, and we have a little cubby, and a week's worth of food goes in there, and you had your own snacks for the week. And there was a bit of trading done towards the end, and we took food for 49 days. I was very confident that would be fine. Everyone started panicking when we knew we weren't going to be inside for the record. And but I knew that I didn't eat all my food. I knew Alexia would not eat all her food. Tamara didn't eat all her food. So actually we accumulated the leftovers, and that kept us going. And we still had meals when we got in. We just didn't have any snacks. So the fun stuff is
gone. The good stuff,
yeah. But the meals were functional.
What was the sort of the hottest item? What were the treats that everyone desperately wanted?
It was quite funny because the snacks, everybody I think we'd been training and we'd been prepping and we'd all been living together. So everyone was quite healthy at the time. And they were like, oh, yeah, I don't want chocolate. I don't want this. I want some cereal bar and I want some rice cakes. And at the end, everyone's like, oh, my God, who's got chocolate? Is there any chocolate left on this boat? And it was so funny. The snacks disappeared and everyone had to eat meals. But generally, the food was pretty good. Even though we packed for 49 days, I was quite chuffed that I was correct that we had enough to go. Provisioning for the boat, the girls did an exceptional job. Annemiek and Debs did that. And obviously with Annemiek's experience from the ocean race, it helped. But, taking everything with you for 8 people to go for an unknown amount of time is quite an undertaking.
It's quite a lot of stuff.
And it is a lot of stuff. And the biggest thing we couldn't run out of is tea for me or coffee for Alexia. That was like the key critical requirements. So they did an excellent job at that. And then initially we were driving a lot because we didn't have the confidence in the pilot. We didn't really know the pilot settings for the different conditions. And then we got better at that because we realised that it's fine, but actually the pilot drives much better at night. It drives much better reaching. Sometimes we can beat the pilot, and if that was the case, we drove. And sometimes the conditions were just so lovely you wanted to drive. Everybody got that moment where they were driving at over 40 knots, going, oh.
That's quite a milestone to drive Helm at 40 knots.
It is.
I mean,
we all knew that we wanted to aim for 28 to 30. And so that was the comfortable place. We got really comfortable with that super quick. But when suddenly you're doing 40 knots, you're like, are we meant to be doing this? And we kept remembering Brian Thompson saying to us, you do not need to do 40 knots. And we were like, okay. But we never sustained it. But yeah, everybody had that moment. It wasn't like just 1 or 2 people. Everybody had that moment where they were like, okay, this is really fast and I'm driving. Okay.
What does the wheel feel like at that speed? Does it load up or is it?
Super smooth to the point where you don't actually want to touch it, because if you do, it's going to have a really big effect on it. And you can actually tell the difference who's driving when you're down below by the motion.
As
it's
in
really interesting.
Pilot or person?
I could tell who was driving out the
As
people.
in which crew member?
Yeah, it was really interesting.
What, some smoother than others?
Yeah, and if somebody was working really hard to make the numbers and somebody that found it easy to make the numbers, it was really, really interesting. And because some people drive more than others, they have a better feel. And it was really interesting. Alexia has a natural feel because she did all the driving and training because we were doing all manoeuvres all the time. So everyone was in their roles. So she was quite good at the setup. So whenever we did anything, she would drive. Then she would get the setup right and then we could drive from there. And it was much more efficient doing it that way rather than someone new trying to find the setup.
And presumably then you've got people like Tamara who are like trying to find the next 0.2 of a knot all the time.
Absolutely. And she would be like, this is my trimming window. I've got this moving from here to here. And she would pass on that information. And it was really nice to have that because she's like, no, it doesn't. And she'd be down below and she'd be like, we're over trimmed. And she'd go up on deck, ease everything. And everyone would be like, how do you do that? Just coming out. She's like, I could feel it. It was really cool.
You do get to that place on a boat though, don't you, where you're, I cruise rather than race, but you're down below and you go, they've just oversheeted the main. And the boat's sort of heeling, but it just feels dead.
Stuck.
Yeah. And you ease it a bit, or you're going, head sails flogging. And you can feel it down below. Or the sound changes a little bit, and all of a sudden you go, I know what it needs, but I'm meant to be off watch and I don't want to micromanage. But
but it can help. And actually what was really nice is everyone was really open for that. Everyone wanted to learn and wanted to do the best job possible. So actually if you come up with a comment, it's great. And the noise, the intensity that you live at, I mean, you lie in your bunk and you literally, all your internal organs are being shaken inside. And sometimes it's just impossible to sleep. You're just resting, but it's just not looking at numbers. You're not asleep at all. And the noise, like the boat makes a certain noise above 30 knots and you're like, oh, we're at 30 knots.
Right. Yeah.
You can tell. But it's just like deafening down
Did you
below.
guys wear like noise cancelling headphones?
It was interesting. I didn't, and I adapted to it, or I've gone deaf. I haven't really decided yet. But Alexia wore noise cancelling headphones and she was just like, oh my God, I still can't sleep. And it's really, really amazing that boat was humming and singing and playing its own tune the whole time. And it's interesting because Clement, who sailed the boat before, that boat is known for singing and humming really loudly. The foil, the rudder that's in the leeward rudder makes a humming noise, and then the windward rudder, when it goes in and out, makes a really high-pitched whine. I mean, the boat sings its way along, and it was a joke that Clement said, oh yeah, the wildlife here is coming, we don't hit anything. Like, the boats never hit anything. And actually it was a net that we caught on the foil, not, we didn't bump into anything. And so, but yeah, she's a noisy boat.
Yeah. Talk to us about the crew. How did you choose who to take with you? Obviously, Alexia sort of came up with the concept of the project. You were leading it together. Who was skipper? How did yours and Alexia's relationship work, and what were the strengths of the different crew, and how did you choose to take them, and what did you see them develop into during the
the people dynamics is always I love this topic, and I love seeing it either work or not work. I mean, obviously when it doesn't work, it's a bit depressing. But I was really lucky. Alexia rang me and was like, I want you on board, and if anything happens to me, you have to make this happen. So I was like, okay, we're in it together. Okay, that's cool. My job is to facilitate this project and take the load off you and help make it happen. And we actually went to the mountains, because I knew her, but I hadn't sailed with her before. We actually went to the mountains outside of our normal environment with a guide, and we just spent 3 days like kind of beasting ourselves and seeing if we could still communicate and be on the same page. And it was really, really valuable time, and just learning to trust each other and stuff. And I'd say our relationships got better and better as we got used to each other and understood each other. And she was inundated with people wanting to be part of the project. I think she said she had like 300 different people apply and talk to her.
So there's massive appetite out there for...
Huge appetite, because it was like, an opportunity, and maybe I could be there. And she was really keen that the project was international. And, every time I went into a sailing environment, people would be like, how's it going? Is there any chance? And I'm just like, just contact Alexia. I was like, palm it off. But she's like, right, look, all these people, how do we get people on board? And, we sailed with Elodie Metro and Marie Rieu for a long time, but then they had other commitments. So they took themselves out, and it was like, we just got used to everybody. And we sailed with lots of people, and, the few people that stuck around, and we were like, actually, let's build the team around these people. And we were like, what's missing? And it was quite important for us to have young blood, young energy, enthusiasm, and give them the opportunity. And Deborah Blair came with us on the Mod 70, did the Caribbean 600, did the transatlantic back. We also got Rebecca Gamer-Hornell on there as well for the trip back. Just seeing them being really happy and set up, and their energy, and just, it was like breathing a bit of fresh air into it. You don't want all the same people.
These are people you hadn't sailed with before.
Hadn't sailed with before,
fresh
but
dynamics.
Actually could see the benefit of it, and actually their energy gave a new lease of life to everything, which was nice. If you sail with all the same people, it all gets a bit boring, and you need that variety. And then, just the other skills. We were in Saint-Tropez, and Tracy Edwards actually messaged me, and she's like, one of the sailors from Maiden is in Saint-Tropez, and I think you'll be interested. So I contacted Molly, and I was like, if you're around on lay day, come for a sail, come and meet Alexia. It'd be a really good opportunity. And that day she asked all the right questions. She literally threw herself at everything and was super enthusiastic, and we were like, this is cool. Yeah. And she spoke French, which, was helping with the language barriers. And we kept her for the delivery and then just didn't let her go, and it was really lovely seeing her grow into that role. And then we got to the point where we were like, okay, how many people are we going to go with? And we started thinking around 6, and I was like, And we went sailing once, and Deborah hurt her back, and immediately you're short of somebody. Yeah. And I was like, that's too tight.
You need some reserve.
Yeah, we need some ability to have an injury without it costing us. So we decided that 8 was a really nice number. And I got to the point where I was like, I think we've done our job on newbies, like going around the world for the first time. I think if we add any more people to this crew, it needs to be people with experience.
Yeah, so that's where people like Bess.
We need some grown-ups. I was like, I can't do this again. I need some grown-ups. And then we got Tamara with Annemiek come on board, and then Stacey I saw her at the Admiral's Cup, and I was like, if you want in, you need to phone Alexia. I was like, you're a sailmaker by trade, and that was like a big gap that we had. And I was like, and you've been around the world before, so you kind of know what to expect. She was like, but I haven't sailed a big multi-hull. I was like, big boat.
None of us have.
Yeah, join the club. I was like, but you need to make that happen. I was like, I've sailed with you. I know you. You need to see if you and Alexia work out. And she was committed with the Admiral's Cup, and it didn't quite work out at the end of the Fastnet for her to go and see Alexia. And I was like, you either want it or you don't. I can't do this for you. So I kind of had to extract myself from that. And then she arranged to go and see her at the prize giving when they were in Monaco. She went and saw Alexia, and it was like, oh, that's interesting. And then after the double-handed World Championships that we had in Cowes, Stacey went and sailed before I could get there. So she actually sailed with Alexia without me being around, which I think was a good thing. And Alexia was like, oh, she immediately fitted in and like was a grown-up. So I think we'll keep her. I was like, oh, okay then. And, you know, we all agreed at the beginning that personalities was more important than skill, because you can teach the skill because all of us were learning the boats for the first time anyway. But the right group of personalities was really important. Alexia feeds off energy, and if it's a negative energy, she just switches off.
She is a ball of energy herself, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely. But she needs the right energy around her, and if it's too difficult, she's not interested. She hasn't got the patience for it. And she was like, this is a good energy. And I was like, cool, if it works, we'll make it work.
And how tight as a group were you by those final miles in?
It was funny because, Harry's like, my partner, he was like, 57 days, there must have been some highs and lows and some frustrations. I was like, yeah, but I said, but when you go through something as intense as that, like it bonds you for life. And I think, achieving it, we knew that none of us could have achieved it on our own. We all achieved it together and everybody played their part. So, it was the joy and being together at the end was genuine, like it wasn't false at all.
And talk us through that moment of coming over the finish line. It's been so hard the couple of days leading up to it. Then you've got the lighthouses, you've got the helicopter, you've got a reception. Presumably you've no idea what reception you're going to get. What's that like?
That moment, it was actually almost really nice to do it and still have 30 miles to go before we saw other people, because it was allowed to be ours. We fought for that. And at the end, when I was like, finally, and it was utter relief. And then I just saw the joy on everyone's face. I was like, oh my God, this is like, for me, I was like, oh, done another lap. Like we made it. And then it kind of sinks in what we have done, and you see the joy and the elation. And, just even seeing familiar faces in the helicopter was exciting. But actually having the 30 miles upwind that we had to sail back to the Brest was actually really nice. It gave us just a bit of space to process, to talk.
Be in your little bubble.
Yeah, to actually enjoy it ourselves. And then, then everybody came on board and we were ready to be excited for everybody else then. But I think if it had been finish line straight in, I think it all would have been a bit too much. But that 30 miles was a really good processing time.
And so you came in, 24 hours after Sodebo. Brest is kind of in party mode, presumably. 2 records coming in. What was the reception like?
It was unbelievable, given it was raining and it was a Monday. It was Monday afternoon, but in true French style for a sailing event, everyone was there. And they were stood in the rain, and we didn't even notice it was raining. It was great. And, I think the young ones had seen the coverage of Thomas Cavell and the crew finishing, and they were kind of thinking, oh, we're not going to get that. Like, we don't have that budget. Mm. But we had the naval plane fly over. We had the helicopter at the finish. We had some boats out on the water coming in. We had the fireboat that we went under the water, which was like the most exciting thing ever. We moored up. We had the flares. We had the stage. We had the songs that we'd chosen, and we were really chuffed that we chose some good songs. Like we docked into Unstoppable, and we went on the podium to Tonight's Going to Be a Good Night. And that was kind of the feel of the whole thing. The whole afternoon was just like party time.
The French really get it, don't they? They're just Vendée Globe, whatever the race is, they're there, they turn out, all weathers, all times of year and day or night.
And Brest is, they know that they own this record. They have a walk of fame with the handprints in the pavement of anybody that's got a record that starts and finishes in Brest. And we were, for the rest of the week, we were going into restaurants and they were like, oh, we'll give you champagne and well done and it's great you're back, and it was just lovely. Really, really
So you've
lovely.
come back to England to recover.
Yeah, and nobody knows what you've done. It's like, oh, you just sailed around the world, by the way.
I get so frustrated. I just don't understand why the British don't get it in the way that the French do. What do you, in your view, what's the sort of the difference? Why do the French get it and we don't?
I mean, sailing is mainstream news in France, alongside rugby, football, whereas we just don't have that coverage in the newspaper or on the news. Sailing is considered a niche sport, and I think it's sometimes too complex for everybody to understand because there's so many disciplines. Oh, is that an Olympic sport? Well, no, that bit is, but that bit isn't, and that's offshore, and that's a record, and that's a race, and I think we're not very good at making it understandable to our general audience.
And in terms of sharing the limelight as well, as Thomas Coville and Benjamin Schwartz came out and greeted you in, didn't they?
Yeah, they were there for our arrival. They handed us our bouquets of flowers and said some lovely, lovely words for what we'd achieved, but also for the tenacity and resilience Alexia showed to put that project together and make it happen. And that was my choke up moment. Like, as soon as he was super nice to us, I was like, just to get, those words from a peer who had just achieved something quite phenomenal himself. It kind of said what we'd achieved. I think that said more to us than anything else.
That's what I wanted to come on to next in terms of having crossed the finish line. Now you've had a few days to think about it. What does it mean for you? What does the sort of obviously you wanted to put a benchmark down. What's the sort of the legacy and what is it that you feel that you've achieved with this? Yeah,
I think for me, I was like, 7 laps, that's quite impressive. 4 non-stop, the fastest. And then you look at it in relative to everything else and actually no, this is huge. And there were a few kind of little reels that were out and you slowly catch up with all the WhatsApps and the media that was out there. And someone's like, this is a moment in history. And it was really interesting. It was like, a record's there to be beaten and someone else will beat it. Gitana 18 will beat it, or, there will be another boat, SVR will go out and beat it. And you're like, that's cool. That's what the Jules Verne is all about. But actually, when you change history or when you write a bit of history or when you do there's so few firsts left in the world. I'm really lucky I've done a few of them now. But that's huge. And that hopefully will have a knock-on effect on our sport. I mean, 2 records in 24 hours is huge for our sport, offshore sailing. I think for girls, women in sailing, multi-hull sailing, I think we've just kind of hopefully blown the doors off that topic and put that to rest. And you look at some of the comments and, do we need a female record? And aren't you all doing the same thing? But we went from 3 women rounding Cape Horn on a multi-hull to 11 women just by 1 boat sailing around the world. So it still needs to be done. Like, we are so far behind, and hopefully we've just pushed that forwards now.
And what would you like to see change as a result of it?
Opportunity. I think all we're asking for is opportunity. We're shown that it doesn't matter whether you're male or female with all this offshore sailing, you can be part of it and you can do it and you can manage it. But there's got to be an opportunity to do it. So whether that's through funding in our sport, so there's more projects, or that's through the guys that have the projects being more willing to open the doors to have females on board.
Because other areas of the sport have made huge strides. Obviously, some of it's been mandated. Feels maybe like the IMOCA world has kind of gone, oh, this is just what we do now. We sail mixed crews. It's not even a question. How do we make that push so the big multis, the super yachts, all that catches up?
Yeah, I think it's a slow process. I mean, as you said, we mandated it to make it happen, and now it's become normal. I mean, SCA wasn't that long ago, and from there we've changed life. When I did Turn the Tide on Plastic as a fully mixed crew, that was still unusual. We'd only just got a female or 2 females on each boat. And now the Ocean Race Atlantic this year will be 50-50. So we've got there, but it's still mandated in the rule, but there's a wider pool of people to choose from, so it's easier.
Presumably as more people have the experience, there's less need to mandate it because they go, we want the best sailors. Actually, she's done 5 of these races, he's done 3, she's more experienced, we'll go with that.
Yes, and it's taken time to get there, and that's what we don't have in the multi-hull world yet. We've got very few women with experience, so we need to open up the opportunities to grow that experience to then make sure that they're all, so Thomas Coville goes again, Not that his wife wants him to, but Benjamin Schwartz takes it on and he goes again. That'd be a mixed crew that goes next time. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, amazing.
I'll throw my hat in the ring now.
I will come on to what's next in a minute maybe, but one thing that I wanted to ask you was about how you feel you've developed as a sailor and as a skipper from your days on the BT Global Challenge to where you are now, because you've got more experience sailing around the world than certainly more than anybody I know, and a whole lot more than most people have ever had. How do you think you've changed, and what do you think you've learned along the way as a sailor and as a skipper?
I think that the journey has been really interesting, and I actually, COVID and going back to double-handed sailing and doing short course racing actually was really good for me, and it made me much more competitive and more detailed as a sailor. You can go offshore and you can manage people, but actually can you race? And I think that helped hone my skills and actually reminded me what I've learned along the way. And then I've put that back in.
That was in the 3600?
In the 3300.
3300, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was a really good couple of years of doing some small boat sailing where, you make one mistake on a jibe and you go from the front of the fleet to the back of the fleet. It's very humbling very quickly. And doing those Rorke races and that was really good to kind of get your skills right. And that is navigation, strategy, tactics, and boat handling. And I think when you come back into this environment, you can then see everybody's roles because you've done all of them. Because there's nowhere to hide, whether you're in your solo or you're double-handed, you do everything. That then you can get the best out of people in those roles. So I think, I'm probably calmer. My management skills are probably much better as a leader, and I find where I fit in and hopefully get the best out of everyone, even if it's being Alexia's co-skipper and allowing her to be the best version of herself, for example, on this one. And then, even now in my sailing that I'm doing outside of that, what's my role? How do I fit in? How do I give the right information to get the best from everybody? And I think I've just got better at that. And the opportunity to sail with skilled people, you learn all the time, whether it's having Brian Thompson come and coach you, whether it's sailing with Tamara, who's a gold medalist. You learn from everybody, even from the young ones, because they have a different perspective. They're like, well, why am I doing this? Why don't I just do that? And you're like, oh yeah, good point. It challenges you and you can only come out the other side. I'm really open to feedback and I love the opportunity to learn.
I remember when you were skipping Turn the Tide, you and I had a chat about this, related to this, and you were talking about how you'd gone from kind of trying to avoid negatives to being positive, as in, worrying about, I don't want to not be last, but you know what I mean? I don't want to fail, I don't want to... And it was trying to avoid that. And there was a shift, I think, during that campaign where you were setting positive goals maybe more. Thinking back to that, how far have you jumped along that road?
Yeah, no, I would definitely say it's even with the 8 of us in the last 57 days, I struggled probably a couple of times and it took me a couple of days to get back, on form, where I had to deal with my frustrations and get realigned. But generally I was the positive voice and I was like, so we're going to do it like this and we're going to do this and this is going to happen. And everyone's like, oh, okay then. And that was my role, to be the glue to bring everybody together. I kind of enjoy that.
I think we're probably heading towards the end of the time that we've got today. You're off sailing next week. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to do?
Yes, I'm going to enjoy the sunshine, the warm sunshine of the Caribbean.
I am in no way jealous.
So I'm going on to Wave Walker, a Swan 58, with a lovely family, very competitive crew. I've sailed with them before. I've done a Newport Bermuda with them and BVIs with them before. And we're going to go and do the Nelson Cup round Antigua and then the Caribbean 600.
And what's beyond that? It feels like you've already achieved everything that there is. What's next for you? Have you still got dreams that you want to go and do?
Yeah, this season I'm lucky. I'm going to be sailing Tilicana to the Maxi Wally Cento for the season. Wave Walker's got a full season as well, so regattas with those guys. But the famous project will continue. You know, we're striking while the iron's hot and there's momentum. We have a couple of the sponsors signed for continuation, and hopefully we'll get some more. We've still got the Mod 70, so there will be some more sailing for sure. But I think, you know, Alexia and I now know what it's all about, and we can go and do a better job next time.
Yeah. And if you could, for any event, for any budget, what would your dream campaign and your dream setup be? If somebody said, here's a blank check, go and do whatever you want in exactly the way that you want to do it, what would that look like?
Now I've had a taste of a Jules Verne and sailing a multi-hull and doing it really fast around the world. That's got to be the way forwards now.
Turns out it's quite addictive, is it?
Yeah, speed and, you know, it's the technology now. I mean, it's exciting. It's an exciting place to sail and be part of, but also to go and, you know, have the opportunity to work something up and do something quite special. It takes half the time of any other race.
More time at home.
Well, yeah, you know, and
more time for other things.
Yeah, I got more laps in me for sure. Lucky 7, but I think, you know, 8 and 10 are much rounder numbers.
Okay. 12 maybe. 12 is a good
I don't know. I've got to retire at some point.
Surely not, no. How old is Sir Robin Knox-Johnson?
Well, that's right, yeah.
No need to stop, just keep on going.
Well, so long as I'm still an active crew member and I'm not, you know, the bit slowing them down, then I'll be fine.
In an armchair at the back telling people what to do. I think you've got some way to go before you get there.
Good.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for sharing the story. I love hearing about this sailing that I will probably never get the chance to do, and probably some of our listeners won't do either, but it's really inspiring. There's one final question that I want to know. If someone's listening to that and they go, Dee's incredible, the story's incredible, how do I go and do that? How do I go from, I mean, you started, you weren't even a sailor. What would your piece of advice be to someone to go, I feel inspired by what you've shared today. How do I emulate that? What do I do?
The million-dollar question. But sailing has so many facets to it. So you don't have to go and sign up and go around the world first time. There's so much you can do along the way. And the best way is to just go and try it, whether it's a holiday or whether it's joining a boat for some racing. Go and see if you like it first. If you don't love it, then I would not say persevere with it. If you do love it, then life's about opportunities, and the big decision you make is which ones to grab.
Okay. Cool. I can't really say any more than that, can I?
Thank you, Dee.
Thank you. It was good to chat.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, that's all we've got time for, guys. If you've enjoyed that, give us a thumbs up, a like, a share, all of that good stuff. Once again, thanks to the Royal Southern Yacht Club for hosting us today, and we will see you next time on the Sailing Podcast. Thanks to our awesome sponsors, Sunsail, for making this episode possible.